Picture this, a monk sitting completely still in a stone monastery somewhere high in the mountains, no modern medicine, no gym membership, no green smoothies, yet somehow living well into his 90s or even past 100. And he is not the exception, this was the norm. Communities of monks throughout history consistently outlived the average population by decades, and for a long time the modern world just kind of shrugged and chalked it up to clean living or maybe a stress-free lifestyle. But researchers are now uncovering something far more specific, far more fascinating, and it has everything to do with how these people breathed. Not what they ate, not how much they slept, how they breathed. Now I know what you might be thinking. Breathing is automatic. We all do it. What is there to know? But that assumption is exactly the problem. And by the end of this video, I think you're going to look at every single breath you take in a completely different way. Because there is a growing body of scientific evidence suggesting that the deliberate rhythmic breathing practices these monks used every single day were essentially hacking their nervous systems, their immune function, their cardiovascular health, and even their cellular aging processes. And the most remarkable part? These monks had no idea why it worked. They just knew that it did. So today we are going to do something unique. We are going to reverse engineer the ancient wisdom of monastic breathing traditions and then hold it up against what modern science is only now beginning to understand. The results are going to surprise you, and more importantly, you're going to leave this video with practical tools you can use today. Let us start with the elephant in the room. Why did monks live so long in the first place? When historians and researchers look at monastic communities across cultures, whether we are talking about Tibetan Buddhist monks, medieval Christian monasteries in Europe, Japanese Zen practitioners, or Hindu yogic communities in India, there is a consistent pattern that keeps appearing. These groups showed remarkable longevity compared to their surrounding populations. Now, some of this can be attributed to diet, to regular sleep schedules, to reduced exposure to violence or accidents. Those factors matter, but researchers notice something else. The one practice that transcended culture, religion, and geography was the daily commitment to structured rhythmic breathing. Every single one of these traditions had it, and they practiced it for hours every single day for their entire lives. The question is, why would breath specifically have such a powerful effect on how long and how well you live? To answer that, we have to understand something called the autonomic nervous system. Now stick with me here because this is where it gets genuinely mind-blowing. Your autonomic nervous system runs in the background of your entire existence. It controls your heart rate, your digestion, your hormonal releases, your immune responses, and even your inflammatory processes. You cannot consciously tell your heart to beat slower or your stomach to digest faster. Except that is not entirely true, because there is one function of the autonomic nervous system that you can consciously control: breathing. And because breathing is connected to this entire system, when you deliberately change how you breathe, you're essentially holding a steering wheel to processes that otherwise run completely on autopilot. This is not metaphor, this is anatomy. Your breathing rate and pattern directly stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in your body and the primary driver of what researchers call the parasympathetic nervous system, or your rest and digest mode. When the vagus nerve gets consistent, rhythmic stimulation through slow, deliberate breathing, it signals your entire body to shift out of fight or flight mode. Heart rate variability improves, inflammation markers drop, cortisol levels decrease, immune function strengthens. And critically, the cellular repair processes that only activate when your body is in a calm state begin to do their work properly. Now think about what monks were doing. They were practicing rhythmic breathing for multiple hours every single day. They were essentially giving their vagus nerve a daily workout, keeping their bodies in a state of deep physiological calm for extended periods, in a way that almost no one else in history was doing with such consistency and intention. And here is where it connects to longevity. One of the most powerful predictors of lifespan that researchers have identified in recent decades is something called heart rate variability, or HRV. This is the variation in time between each heartbeat. Counterintuitively, a higher variation is what you want. It means your nervous system is flexible, responsive, and resilient. People with high HRV tend to live longer, get sick less often, recover from illness faster, and have significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease. And what is one of the strongest evidence-based ways to raise your HRV? Slow, rhythmic breathing. Studies have shown that when people breathe at around 5 to 6 breaths per minute, which is dramatically slower than the average person's 12 to 20 breaths per minute, something extraordinary happens. The cardiovascular and respiratory systems enter what is called resonance frequency. The heart rate begins to synchronize with the breath in a deeply coherent pattern. Blood pressure regulation becomes more efficient. The baroreflex, which is your body's blood pressure feedback system, functions at peak performance. And all of this happens after just a few minutes of sustained practice. The monks were doing this for hours, daily, for decades. Now let us talk about a specific tradition that gives us the clearest window into how intentional this practice actually was. In Tibetan Buddhist monasticism, there is a practice called pranayama in the broader yogic sense, though Tibetan monks have their own specific names and methods. The core of these practices involves precisely controlling the length of each inhalation, the pause at the top of the breath, the exhalation, and the pause at the bottom. Ratios like 4, 7, and 8 were used in various forms, meaning 4 counts to inhale, 7 counts to hold, 8 counts to exhale. Other traditions favored equal breathing, where inhale and exhale are the same length. Others emphasized extended exhales. What is remarkable from a scientific standpoint is that all of these techniques, despite coming from completely different cultural origins, share the common thread of dramatically slowing the breath and extending the exhale. And modern respiratory science has confirmed that extended exhales specifically activate the parasympathetic system more powerfully than almost any other non-pharmacological intervention available. The exhale is where the healing happens. When you breathe out slowly and completely, you stimulate the vagus nerve most intensely, drop your heart rate, and signal to every system in your body that you are safe. The monks may not have had the vocabulary of neuroscience, but they had mapped this territory through thousands of years of careful observation of human experience. They noticed what these breathing patterns did to the mind, to the body, to the quality of life, and they built entire daily structures around maximizing those effects. Let us shift now to another dimension of this that is perhaps the most fascinating of all. Cellular aging. For a long time, the idea that something as simple as breathing could influence how quickly your cells age would have sounded like wishful thinking. But since the discovery and study of telomeres, the protective caps at the end of your chromosomes, that conversation has changed dramatically. Telomeres shorten as you age, and the rate at which they shorten appears to be influenced strongly by chronic stress and inflammation. People under constant psychological and physiological stress show accelerated telomere shortening, which translates directly into accelerated cellular aging, increased disease risk, and shorter lifespan. Conversely, practices that consistently reduce chronic stress and inflammation appear to slow telomere shortening. And multiple research groups have now found that long-term practitioners of breathwork and meditation show longer telomeres compared to age-matched populations who do not practice these things. The monks were, in a biological sense, aging more slowly at the cellular level. Now let us connect another crucial dot here: chronic inflammation. We now understand that most of the diseases associated with aging, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, many cancers, and a host of autoimmune conditions, share a common root in chronic low-level inflammation. This is sometimes called inflammaging, the slow, smoldering inflammatory state that seems to accompany and accelerate the aging process. And guess what dramatically influences the degree of chronic inflammation in your body? The activity of your autonomic nervous system, specifically the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic activation. When people are chronically stressed, running in sympathetic overdrive day after day, their bodies produce elevated levels of inflammatory cytokines. Over years and decades, this adds up to real, measurable biological damage. The monks were doing the opposite. Their daily breathing practices were keeping them in parasympathetic dominance for significant portions of each day. Their inflammatory baseline was lower, their cellular repair processes ran more efficiently, their bodies simply did not accumulate damage at the same rate. This is not magic, it is physiology. But let us go even deeper because there is a dimension to rhythmic breathing that goes beyond the nervous system and inflammation, and it touches on something that researchers in the field of psychoneuroimmunology are only beginning to fully appreciate: the relationship between breathing patterns and the immune system. Your immune function is not separate from your nervous system, it is deeply intertwined with it. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline suppress immune function when they are chronically elevated. This is why people under sustained stress get sick more easily and heal more slowly. But the connection runs deeper than hormones. The nervous system directly innervates immune tissue. There are neural connections between your brain, your vagus nerve, and your lymphoid organs, the structures that produce and regulate immune cells. And the vagal tone, meaning how well and how consistently your vagus nerve is activated, appears to play a direct role in how effectively your immune system can mount a response and then stand down appropriately when the threat is passed. Monks with decades of rhythmic breathing practice behind them were, in effect, keeping their immune systems finely tuned, responsive without being overactive, calm without being suppressed. This balance is extraordinarily difficult to achieve through any other means, and is something that most modern humans simply never experience. Let us also address something that often gets overlooked in these conversations: nasal breathing versus mouth breathing, because this distinction turns out to be enormously important, and it is embedded deeply in almost every traditional breathing practice in history. The vast majority of monastic breathing traditions explicitly emphasize breathing through the nose, and modern research has revealed why this matters far more than most people realize. The nasal passages are not simply pipes that air flows through, they are sophisticated processing systems. They filter, humidify, and warm incoming air. They produce nitric oxide, a molecule that acts as a vasodilator, meaning it opens up blood vessels, improves oxygen delivery to tissues, and has significant antimicrobial properties. Mouth breathers miss out on virtually all of these benefits. Moreover, nasal breathing tends to slow the breath naturally, simply because the passages are narrower. This enforced slowdown, built right into the physical mechanics of nasal breathing, is part of what makes it so physiologically beneficial. The monks were not accidentally breathing through their noses. It was a deliberate, taught, and rigorously maintained practice. They were maximizing nitric oxide production, optimizing oxygen absorption, and regulating their breathing rate, all simultaneously, through this single behavioral choice. This is what the science of rhythmic breathing is ultimately revealing. It is not about any single dramatic effect. It is about changing the daily baseline of your physiology in ways that compound across decades. The monks figured this out without the science. The science is now confirming what they knew, and here is the question that I want to leave you sitting with. We live in an era of extraordinary medical technology, more sophisticated than anything that existed before. We have access to pharmacology, diagnostics, surgical interventions that would have seemed like miracles to any previous generation. And yet rates of chronic disease, anxiety, cardiovascular illness, and age-related cognitive decline continue to climb. And an ancient monk, sitting alone in a cold stone room with nothing but a discipline of breath, was outliving and outthriving most of us. Maybe the most advanced health technology we have access to has been with us all along, built right into our anatomy, waiting patiently in the 20,000 breaths we take each day, most of them wasted, most of them unintentional, most of them shallow and rapid and disconnected from any awareness at all. What if even 5 or 10 of those daily breaths became intentional? What if you built 20 minutes of rhythmic nasal breathing into your morning or your evening, the way a monk builds it into every single day without exception? The science suggests the effects would be measurable within weeks and profound within years. You do not need a monastery, you do not need a tradition, you need the information, which you now have, and you need the decision to actually do something with it. If you found this genuinely useful, please share it with someone who you think needs to hear this. And if you want to go deeper into the science of breathwork, there is another video coming that is going to take everything we covered today and get very specific about which protocols work for which outcomes. Make sure you are subscribed so you catch that one, because I promise it is going to be worth your time. The breath is not a background event. It is the signal your body uses to understand what kind of world it is living in. Change the signal, change the biology. The monks knew it. The science confirms it. The rest is up to you.